Welcome back to the Built on Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Max Hansen, the CEO of Y Scouts, where we find purpose-aligned and performance-proven leaders. Speaking of, today our guest is Dr. Kevin Preston. Dr. Kevin Preston is a physician blending traditional Chinese medicine with energy and quantum healing to help people heal at the root level. He's the curator of the New Human Experience, a movement and podcast inspiring purpose-driven living, and leads retreats worldwide to push the boundaries of what's possible in medicine and human evolution. Dr. Kevin Preston, welcome to the Built on Purpose podcast.
Thank you for the invitation. I love just getting to the good, deep stuff, and I'm excited to have a conversation with you about that.
Yeah, awesome. I was excited to have you on the show, and I know we touched on this just a couple minutes ago, but I met Dr. Kevin Preston. Hey, what is do you go by Dr. Kevin? Is that okay?
Yeah, Dr. Kevin, either one's all good.
All right. Well, we'll give you Dr. Kevin. You've earned at least that. I had an experience with Dr. Kevin. I was at a conference, not really even knowing. I didn't really look to see who was going to be there, and I had one of the most amazing experiences and met an amazing guy that I'm going to share with everybody here. So I was really looking forward to this. I can talk a little bit about the experience I had as we get further into this, but I want to get a little bit of background from him. So I guess the first question I'd start out, just so people that are, kind of just tuning in, kind of understand who you are. If somebody's just tuning in, who are you? And then why should they listen for the next 60 minutes? Like, what will they learn from what we're going to discuss?
I'm somebody who has learned through experience. And there's this quote I heard years ago that wisdom is the thing you get after you needed it. And I feel like a lot of my life has been that way, trial and error. I love diving in. I use myself as an experiment, and Chinese medicine was a path that showed up through my own challenges, and it worked really well. And that took me into a whole new world. And what I've cultivated, or what I've discovered about myself over the years, is that my medicine invokes the medicine in other people. And that's something I love inspiring at the highest level, is that, like, I don't heal people, they heal themselves. But I can be a mirror, I can be a guide, I can kind of be the banks of the river to help shape their direction, but it's their flow, it's their life force. And so I love helping people connect to that deeper inner healer, inner guidance within them, because when people learn something for themselves, it lands way deeper, it lasts, a lifetime, and then you're not going back doing the same loops over and over again. So that's kind of the ethos underneath most of what I do, whether that's in-person patient visits or big events or speaking, and all of the above.
Awesome. And like I said, I'll get more into my experience with them, but because it was absolutely amazing. Just kind of, what's the best thing going on in your life right now?
I would say parenting is definitely way up there. I've got 2 kids. My daughter's 16, my son's 14, and seeing life through their eyes is a gift every single day. And they're also at the age where they can, start poking fun at their father here, and they got a good sense of humor. It's definitely humbling. There's learning all the time, and we laugh a lot, and there's been a lot of real beautiful depth. They're just such fantastic humans. And so when I'm out in the world, they're always on my mind. They're always on my heart. We did some hiking yesterday, and actually there was a couple tough moments yesterday where I feel like I actually misattuned to what was going on with my son. He had some emotions, moving through, and I could tell like I wasn't really meeting him in that. And there's a little bit of stickiness almost. And it wasn't until an hour or two later he shared more of what was going on with him. And then I had that moment of like a bit of shame, a bit of guilt. Oh, I could have done that better. And then, we hugged. And there's just that depth of connection. And so that continues to inspire me because it teaches me all the time. And I make mistakes. I'm human, but I get to learn with each day. And then I got to sit with that a little bit later and just feel the gratitude for, being a parent and having the experiences that I've had with them, and the continuous growth and learning that comes from that. And then I get to share that out into the world in different ways.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Yeah, I've got 5 kids ranging from 6 to 21 years old. I had 3 stepkids. So man, kids, the innocence and how they ask questions and how they see life is something to definitely learn from. I've got some incredible feedback from kids. Um, question for you, and so my audience kind of starts to understand you. Because when I met you, I remember it was the first day of a conference. You didn't speak till the second day, and like, yeah, I was like, this guy sounds like a great guy. But I wasn't really, honestly, I wasn't really paying too close attention. You were very unassuming, very humble, like, and I guess everybody will understand this, getting your background and kind of how you see and how you help people heal. It'll make a lot of sense, or at least it did for me. But how does somebody from Vernon, Canada, get into Chinese medicine to the extent you have and continue down this path with so much purpose and passion?
Well, for that, I got to back up a little bit more. So I grew up in rural Alberta. And, for those listening around the US, especially, a lot of people say Alberta is like the Texas of Canada. A lot of oil field, a lot of farming, a lot of ranching, a lot of really down to earth, amazing people. And I grew up on a farm there, and my grandparents had the farm. And then, we grew up down the road. And so it was outside all the time, animals, nature, fishing, hunting, hands in the dirt, big gardens. And when I look back on that, I feel like it really set me up for Chinese medicine, even though you wouldn't have known it at the time because I didn't grow up with any Chinese medicine. It wasn't something on my radar. My mom was actually a Western medicine nurse, and she worked in healthcare for many years. And so I was actually going more in that direction of Western medicine. I went into college, I was playing hockey. I played all kinds of sports. I went into science, and I'm really grateful that path took me that way. And I ended up having a lot of series of injuries, and hockey was a big precursor to that. But falling off of buildings, or yeah, mountain biking, or all the things that young men tend to do that are maybe more risk oriented, that I had injuries. And my knee actually was something that I had injured pretty intensely a number of times, and that eventually brought me into a clinic where they were getting into acupuncture. And it was after one of the surgeries I had had, and I was in a lot of pain, and it really diminished the pain, and it took the swelling down, and it did it rapidly, to the point where I was shocked a little bit and surprised on how well it went, and how good my knee felt after. And the visual changes, the internal changes, the changes in the pain level were tremendous. And I am, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a curious person, trial and error. I like trying things. I like experimenting on life in general. And that sparked something in me. And I started to have this, I guess, when you feel that inner knowing, or maybe you get an intuition, even though at the time I don't even think I understood my own intuition as fully as I do now, there was something pulling me in that direction. And some of it was unexplainable. And my logical mind said, well, I want to understand, how was that possible? How did putting like little tiny needles in my knee in different points in the body, like, take my pain level from a 10 down to a 5 in one visit? And that led me to read books on Chinese medicine. And the more books I read, the more interested I got. And some of those deep philosophies of, you would always treat the individual, and you would always try and aim to discover what the root issue is of their symptoms. You wouldn't just prescribe the same thing to, all 10 patients that you have, even if they all had headaches or they all had knee pain, because the underlying cause and the root issue for each of them is going to be completely different. Different body types, different genetics, different history, different injuries, different mental emotional picture. And Chinese medicine really actually looks at all of those things. And the philosophy is not separating the mind and the body, or the emotions and the organ systems. Those are all in there together. And so that really gave me a powerful foundation, especially what I had experienced, but also then I got to see that in use in other people. And pretty soon then I shifted gears, went into practice in Chinese medicine, and the real learning began. And I got to see a lot of really incredible outcomes over the years. And it continues to both put me in awe of the power and the potency of that, and the capacity of the human body. So it never gets old.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned your mom being a nurse, in kind of Western healthcare. My mom was also my mom, my sister, all my mom's sisters, actually, they're all nurses, all labor and delivery, actually, which was interesting because that's probably the only place in the hospital where, in my opinion, like, it's super positive most of the time. But talk about, like, do you think the way we approach health in the West is fundamentally broken? And if so, where does healing actually begin?
That's a beautiful one. So I do think there is a massive amount of change that's needed, because what I see in conventional medicine and the greater medical establishment here in Canada too, it's largely become ineffective. And I'm not saying it's not effective in really key places. And I've heard this referenced 1,000 times from other doctors and other speakers that emergency medicine, I feel like we do pretty good. Broken bones, saving lives and everything else is a powerful place in medicine. And I'm so grateful for the knowledge, the skills, and the tools and the expertise for a lot of the people that work in that care. Like, we need emergency medicine. That is profound. It keeps people on the planet, keep us stitched up. I've used emergency medicine a number of times and really grateful for the staff and the care. What I've seen, though, in my career as a Chinese medicine doctor, and I get to see a specific subset of the population as a result, is more in the chronic illness department or more in the optimization where people are fatigued, they're inflamed, they have gut issues. And I have to say, in a lot of those cases, especially autoimmune conditions and the epidemic of chronic inflammatory conditions in the population, Western medicine doesn't do those well. It's suppressive medication or surgery, both of which don't really ever treat the underlying issue. And, it's like, what's going on in the person's body before they ever get to that point of needing those things. And then we got to look at the food systems. We got to look at our educational approach. We have to look at where is the massive disconnect between like health and dis-ease. And there seems to be a huge gap in that, one type of medicine, in this case, conventional medicine, is really like the end user products. If it's not emergency stuff, it's like usually when people are really struggling in some way, or it's putting a Band-Aid on something and getting them moving through. But I haven't met many doctors that have the time or maybe even have the training to kind of go past the high level issues of what's on the surface and really get into unpacking why is this person in my office in the first place? What has brought them here? I'm not saying there's no doctors that practice that way. There's more now, ones that are getting into functional medicine. And I've always thought Chinese medicine was the original functional medicine. Let's get down to the juicy stuff. What's in somebody's environment, what's in their internal environment, ground structure that's led them to this issue in the first place. And let's start there. And so that's what I would love to see change in medicine. If I had a magic wand, I would restructure things in a big way and train all the practitioners to start asking those deeper questions and, address the acute issue as needed, sure. But then that's not where it stops. Then the journey begins right there to start addressing what's underneath.
And absolutely amazing. I'm going to unpack a little bit of this. Well, first and foremost, what I got into kind of paying attention to epigenetics at a company that helped our teammates, and they kind of use epigenetics and their types to really guide them in, how they went about stuff proactively. But talk about and I remember epigenetics, one of the things that they were talking about was Chinese medicine, the history of Chinese medicine, kind of takes that philosophy. Talk about the rich history of Chinese medicine versus like what we have today and how much of that actually has influenced Western, I guess, healthcare versus not.
I think there's such a huge difference in research. So even if we break down the research a little bit, a lot of proponents of Western medical research, I'm not saying it's bad. They often do double-blind placebo control group studies in a lab under fluorescent lighting, artificial conditions. That doesn't necessarily translate equally at all to what happens within the human body. And so I would say Chinese medicine has some of the longest standing research on the planet on actual human beings living their lives, not in a lab, not in artificial conditions, but generations and thousands of years, because there's books that I learned in school that were translated that are over 2,000 years old. And some of those principles talk about thousands of years prior to that in those books. So, a lot of accounts say that's at least 4,000 or 5,000 years older than some. And that's just when they started to be able to write some of this stuff down. And imagine the amount of things that have been lost. These are just the things that have been found, are written on, bamboo paper and all kinds of really cool elements. And I'm glad, maybe I was around. If anybody's into past lives, maybe I was back there then, but some of the original acupuncture needles were not as refined as what they are now. These things were, the size of giant nails or sewing needles. And it makes me kind of chuckle in a humble way. Who was the early people getting treatment with those like significant bloodletting or these giant needles made of animal bones and all kinds of different materials that they used back then, but they found it worked. And I think that's the thing, is like it had to be practical. It wasn't theoretical. It wasn't from a lab, because if it didn't work, somebody would often die, or they would notice the patterns built up. And that was a lot of the really rich history that was written about in those books, and still relevant now, the way the Chinese philosophy looks at the body. It's multi-layered. It has different rules and things that you should follow, and one of them is living in harmony with nature, changing with the seasons, changing with the daylight hours. All of the above would help people thrive, would help them, be more connected internally. And they talked about all of those elements. And what I've seen in my practice, modern day, it still applies. It still works. It still stands up. And then I've also added a lot of modern thought processes. And you mentioned epigenetics. That is a fascinating subject. And I generally look at a blend of all of these things coming together, of, using the best tools, the best technology we have available now, and still built on the foundational principles that have stood the test of time.
Yeah, wow. All right. Well, let me ask you this, because I think this is going to be helpful. And again, these questions are so selfish because I'm learning. Hopefully, everybody else listening is learning and wants to know the same things I do. I'm already so off script, but this is so good. I have to be. So if so, let's say there's somebody walks in your office, a patient that's saying, "Hey, I've got ailments. I'm stressed. I don't sleep well." Like all of the typical things that somebody comes. But maybe they're relatively young. Maybe they've been in a career for maybe 10 years, hard charging. What typically, like, what if you only had an hour with them, and of course you have longer than that, where are you starting at? Like, what are you starting to uncover? What are you starting to get them to understand about themselves, where they can, say they're stressed. Let's say their levels are off the charts when they wake up in the morning. And like, so say there's all these traditional things, which I think is like most people that we're talking about, most hardworking people that don't, really, and maybe they have been working out, but they've been just like, brute strength. Like kind of when I was younger, I just used to just lift as heavy as I could every day and stress my body out. But talk about, so this person walks in your office, they're, let's call it 30 years old, and they're starting to have issues. They maybe have some chronic pain. They have some stress. Maybe they're just about to have a child, like all these things that are all coming together, but they realize that they need to change. Where are you starting with them?
I think one of the first fundamental things that I've seen change the impact of a visit is where we just take a few breaths and slow down a little bit. Because many people that have been to various doctors, various practitioners, I can tell they have been rushed before. They maybe haven't been listened to at a deep level. And so that's just what we do, is we attune to each other, and I'll say, "Hey, let's just slow down a little bit. You don't have to tell me everything in this first visit. We'll probably get through a ton. I'll ask a variety of questions." And I just start to get to know them as a human being, rather than wanting to put them in a category of disease or inflammation or whatever's not working. I like to just see, who is this person? What is happening in their lives? And start to unpack a little bit from there. And we'll get into the body as well. There's different Chinese medicine techniques of like feeling the pulse, looking at the tongue. I'm looking at their eyes. I've already been looking at how they walked in, how they greeted me, how they sat down, the way they carry themselves, the generalized energy that they're sitting with. And that generally attunes me to where to go, which questions to ask, and also just to listen. Because people have often felt, and I would say this is true maybe in medicine, but maybe in somebody's life, that they may not have a ton of people in their life that are actually sitting down in presence and listening to what they have to share. And so they may have held so much inside that then when I start listening, it's a tidal wave of stuff, coming out. But I'm okay with that, because I can kind of field through and wade through those waters to really see what's really important here. What is, the root issue? And there's a saying in Chinese medicine, roots and branch treatment. And if you think of a tree, there's the root and the foundation, and that's always where we want to get to. We may not get there on the first visit, although a lot of times we do. So I'll start with the branches. I might start with, what are some of the symptoms being experienced? Oh, you're not sleeping well. Oh, it's interesting. Sounds like you're in pain a lot of the time and you're more sore than you should be. Sounds like the body's in a generalized state of inflammation. Yeah, there could be a bunch of reasons for that. then like you said, maybe they've been overworking, 78 hours a week for years already and they're grinding themselves. Like that's relevant to me. I want to take that in. Oh, maybe they're skipping meals and maybe they're stressed and it shut down their digestion a little bit. And I could see that fires a little bit off. So we start layering in the story, and the story is important. And the words that they use are important to me because I am quite audience in terms of listening to the words that people say and how they say them. I can get a lot of information from that. And then I may pause and slow them down in certain places because maybe they shared something of, oh, that's just my mom. And I'm like, oh, hang on a second. What's going on there? What do you mean? And it's like, oh, I just had a fight and we've been in this big conflict with my family or something. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's relevant. Of course you're not sleeping. Of course that's added to some stress, and oh, maybe that's brought some stress into your home, and now your spouse is, feeling some stickiness or some conflict and you feel a bit trapped or stuck and you're not sure what to do. What's the body do in that kind of scenario? It tightens up. They stop breathing, they stop feeling relaxed in the evening, and pretty soon the inflammation and their cortisol starts going up a little bit and a host of issues start happening. So nothing's really off the table in a visit like that. And I trust all the years of practice that I've had now to systemically look at the bigger picture and then start to just pull a few of those layers back. And maybe we just work on a few layers of the onion that first visit. And sometimes we're able to get really deep really quickly, but it depends on the person because not everybody's ready or willing to do that in one visit. And I'm not expecting them to trust me wholeheartedly, the moment they sit down. But just being in presence with somebody is often guiding the visit. And honestly, I have found that creates a healing response in somebody where if I'm creating safety, I'm asking good questions, I'm not rushing myself and I'm not rushing them, their body starts relaxing. The cortisol starts going down immediately. Blood pressure maybe even starts dropping while we're sitting there. Just to have that space held for somebody is powerful.
Wow. Uh, wow. My experience with you, and we're going to jump into this. I had heard the concept of hooks and cords before, but I never really thought it through or really like put any like further thought to it. And so to give context to the listeners, I'm at a conference. We've been there for 2 days. Dr. Kevin speaks for a good couple hours. We learn a lot about the foundations of Chinese medicine, which we may or may not get into, about just timing and different organs and stuff that goes on that helps him identify and root issues. So we talk about hooks and cords, and then we come back from a break, and then there's cameras are gone, all the desks gone, and then we lay on mats and do breathing. And I've done breathing before, don't get me wrong. I went through and did breathing through that hooks and cords exercises. That was the most profound experience from breathing I've ever been through. Honestly, through anything. And I've been through like ketamine treatments and stuff like that. Like the ketamine treatments like you would do if I was doing it for more exploratory purposes. But talk about the concept of hooks and cords. I can share more of the experience, but I think I shared with you maybe that night in passing. But like I was like literally on that mat, charged and like lost track of time. I think I was one of the last persons to get up and walk out of there, just like what just happened to me. And I've been through a lot of self discovery stuff too. But talk about the concept of hooks and cords because I think my experience that I had breathing, I saw like people from my past that came through my mind in and out. And I got off that mat feeling better than I ever had. I wish I would have taken more notes like you advised me to, because I'm like, I'll never forget this feeling. Well, I kind of did over time. I haven't forgot about it, but I wish I would have wrote more down. There was some stuff I did write down that I'm glad I did. But talk about the concept of hooks and cords. And then, we even talk about like how, because I can attest firsthand how you've led breathing exercises in groups of people that have been transformational.
Okay, so there's a few layers to build in here for the audience. So let's start with hooks and cords to begin with. Hooks and cords are it's this idea that there can be energetic entanglements in life as a human being. And sometimes I look at it as you got the drier static sheet going on in there. It's going to pick up static. And we're like that as human beings. And we are actually electromagnetic, like walking batteries. We produce light and voltage and energy of all kinds. So Polarity, though, is sometimes where there's a conflict or a bit of stickiness in a given dynamic, and it's often with people. It can be with places too. So I'll often say, like, people, places, and things we can have attachments to, and those attachments may not always be serving us, or they may not always be healthy. Other people may have entanglements and attachments to us that may not always be healthy as well. So what happens, and this is part of the beauty of, like, not only Chinese medicine, but a lot of the esoteric teachings that I've learned, and have had great mentors and trainers over the years to learn these things, because I didn't know these inherently. My family didn't teach me these. This is all stuff that's kind of come along the pathway of being a doc, and putting myself in places and spaces to be able to learn and to look at things with a much wider scope. And so the unseen world is powerful. And even we're on the internet right now. It's invisible. Our cell phones, like the radio waves, the EMF, all that stuff is invisible. We can't see it, but it doesn't mean it's not there. If you listen to a radio, you hear the music, you hear it coming through. You can't see how it got there. So our bodies are similar. We're emitting and putting off invisible forces of energy all the time, and sometimes we're also taking some on. Now, when it comes to hooks and cords, you can envision it however you want, but sometimes maybe there's like a little filament, like a fishing line, that is coming in from somebody else attached to your system, and it's just siphoning a little bit of energy. In other cases, it could be thicker. Maybe it's like a braided rope, maybe it's a big hose, or maybe it's like this big, thick cord that you feel draining your life force or your energy, to be more dramatic about it. And that might be related to somebody that you had a big conflict with. It might have been a polarizing experience. It might be from past woundings or traumas. You can have cords to all kinds of things that you are unaware of. And this, again, it's like the hidden world. This is the unseen nature of energy that I have seen thousands of times really impact us as people. And so when we're going through like an energetic hygiene routine or an energetic inventory, I coach and guide people on how to track that down, because people are often being drained of energy and they don't even know it. They're completely unconscious to what's happening in their own system, but maybe they're tired all the time. Or maybe they have one part of their body that is chronically inflamed and sore all the time, and they can't explain why. And they've had treatments. Maybe they've done acupuncture, massage, they've done it all, osteo, chiro, but something just won't undo in their system. This could be from hooks and cords from other people, other places and experiences that have hooked into your system, and they've, created a lot of stuck energy now. So I'll just pause there for a moment. We'll keep going with me so far.
Yeah, honestly, this was when you talked about this, when you were explaining this part to me, when I was in the moment, I was picking up on it, and I was like, okay. It wasn't till I actually got into the breathing and really started thinking about it that I figured out how profound clearing hooks and cords was. But yeah, keep going on how, like, so the concepts are there. I just wanted to point out to the audience. So if you've already kind of gotten lost and you're like, oh, okay, I don't know if I buy into that. Trust me, there is something here, because I was able to clear them with Dr. Kevin leading a breathing exercise, and it was honestly very super impactful. Probably one of the most impactful like sessions I've ever been through. But I want you to keep going. But I just kind of want to emphasize, like, don't get caught up yet, because this is something. And I think the other thing that I think we talked about in that room is this is the energetic field. So for me, I am religious, and I think some people are like, okay, well, do I have to believe in charged like crystals and stuff like that? And does it go? I believe you can have both. I think there's energy, you can have beliefs. So I put that out there only because some people, I think they try to tune out to stuff like this because they're like, oh, I don't believe in this. But I'm here to say that it's definitely, I believe you can believe in all of it and still have, and still, feel cohesive and feel in line with your religious beliefs as well. But kind of continue down how, once you start identifying these, and then share. I'll remember if you don't remember this, and then share an example of somebody that it's made a significant impact. I know you talked a little bit about specific patients, obviously without their names, but on how clearing cords and hooks has really impacted them positively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great, some great nuances here. So I always say to people, take what resonates. You don't have to believe everything I say, trust what you feel resonant with. And if it's a bit sticky or there's a bit of resistance or defensiveness to what I'm saying, like honor that too. That's okay. There's no right or wrong way here. This is just some of the things I've learned. But also I want the listeners to understand, like, I am a rural farm kid, from Alberta, grew up just, being in the forest, being outside, very practical. And I've taken all of that energy into my practice because I'm here to get results. If I can help somebody get results and change their life, that's what I'm most interested in. And if I can do that in the most loving and compassionate and healthy way possible, that's the recipe I'm looking for. Does it last? Does it work? Can this help somebody realize their greatest potential in their health, vitality, relationships? All of those things are relevant. So one of the reasons I got into learning about hooks and chords is because I had received some sessions on myself and it had a big impact. The reason I knew it had an impact is in those sessions, in some of those cases, I cried like I hadn't cried in ages because I could feel the shift in my body. And to me, that's enough to really show, hey, there's something here for me. What is that? And then I dove in and studied and learned a lot more. And so if you think of, running through the forest, there's all kinds of branches and underbrush and, maybe brambles and thorns and things. You run out, you might be covered on the other side of grasses and leaves and all kinds of things stuck to your body. Think about this in the energetic sense. So let's say you have a big argument with somebody. When they leave the argument or you leave the argument, how do you feel after? How's your energy? Does it bring you down? What's happening? Are you still thinking about that person? Probably yes. Are you going to think about them later that day? Maybe, excuse me, maybe they've triggered you. Maybe you got angry. Maybe you're frustrated. Maybe you kind of blew a gasket a little bit. What energy do you think that sets up for yourself and for them? And this isn't to shame or blame anybody. We're human. This has happened to me loads of times. I'm not perfect at all. So the places that can be sticky or challenging are usually the places where you're going to have more chance of an entanglement of energy. And how's that other person feeling once they leave the argument? Maybe they're really polarized and not loving you in that moment, or they think you're the worst person in the world or whatever, and they're walking away thinking that, where's that energy going? It can be directed back to you, and maybe you're directing energy at them. And if there's sort of a resonance match, even at a lower frequency in that case, that can hook in to your system. And most of the hooks and chords, they pull energy from you. They're not supportive. Like they don't enhance you in some way. Likewise, if you have energetic ties to other people, unconsciously even, you may want something from them. Maybe you're trying to get something from them. And again, I'm not saying you need to feel guilty or bad about that. This is just humans being humans. It's okay. But once we know better, we can do better. And once we're aware of maybe all the energy that we put out there, especially negative energy, we can call that back to ourselves to clean up our energy. Like energy hygiene is important. And we can start releasing the things that other people have connected to us. And you could see this in businesses. You could see it in employees or organizations. Maybe people are looking to you for all the answers all the time. Maybe they start to need you to solve things for them all the time. And so it doesn't always have to be intense or a big conflict. I do find the places that are more challenging or polarized will lead to greater levels of entanglement. So an example could be, you had a past business partner. Maybe you're in business for 10 years and then it started not working out well and stuff started happening. And then they said something about you, you said something about them, and it starts getting kind of messy and it spreads out into the coworkers or into the community, and it can get charged and it can get fiery, and you start feeling disrespected or you start hearing about things they're saying about you. That can build up quite a charge in your system. Chances are there's going to be some entangled energy there, and those can be showing up in hooks and chords in your body, but it's invisible. But it's no less real because maybe you're thinking about it a lot and it's draining your energy. So do your work around it and everything else. And this could be years later. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, that happened to me. Are you still polarized by that person? Do they still pull your energy when you think about them? Maybe you haven't talked to them for years. So different things I've been through in relational dynamics, in business and partnerships, that has been the case too, that when I've really slowed down or had somebody assist me to help guide through and unhook cords and things like that. One of the telltale signs that it works, and I think I shared this in the talk with you guys, was you'll often get a message from that person maybe that day, maybe 2 or 3 days later, and almost without fail, whenever I do something like this and I clear off some of the energy that I tune into for myself, maybe from somebody from my past, maybe I haven't talked to them in years, they will often message me after I do a clearing process. And it's like this confirmation. I'm not saying it's going to happen every time, but the amount of times that's happened for people I've worked with and for myself, it's uncanny. And it shows me what was happening in the energy dynamics. And there's sometimes I have felt the physical shift and the emotional shift when I really got down to those roots. Is like, oh my goodness, this is still here. Like, this is hooked into my system, and I'll go through a process and pull that out. Sometimes there's a huge relief in the body, sometimes a big sigh, sometimes a release of pain or tingling or numbness that I didn't even really fully have my awareness around. And then there's a recapitulation of like my own understanding and more knowledge and more wisdom. And I may find the next day I feel more energized, better digestion, I slept better, and that often endures. And so when we make energy shifts like that and we kind of declutter our energy and our bodies physically, mentally, emotionally, that is super, super powerful. And so it's so simple. It's like unhooking things that are dragging on us, but it's also something that gets overlooked the most in our world, or one of the most, because it's unseen. So nobody really thinks about it. But gosh, I've seen powerful changes.
Yeah, and talk about like so once you're aware of it, like the process to unhook for us it was a breathing guided, breathing exercise with you. But how does somebody obviously they could reach out to you and, schedule time with you, of course. But how else could an individual start clearing hooks and cords on their own? Like what's that actual process?
I think one of the keys here is listening to the body, trusting the body, developing a greater connection with the system, like your own guidance, your own wisdom, your own intuition. I do find that is really lacking in the population. There's a lot of people that are cultivating more and more of that, and we all have immense amount of gifting. We all have huge capacity for being intuitive or even being telepathic and connecting with people, and maybe you feel that with the people around you, but there's often this deeper knowing that is unseen. And to me, one of the best ways to tap into that is you got to slow down. So I would often invite somebody, maybe it's first thing in the morning, last thing at night, clear a little bit of time and space for yourself and just get quiet. Maybe music is a good medium, put on some music, whatever resonates, but something slower, something that allows you to start regulating your breathing, regulating your nervous system, and just start to kind of declutter your mind from the day and start bringing your focus into you. The body, I think, is one of the most powerful communication devices on the planet. There's so much untapped technology in our systems and gifting that we can unlock. One of the ways to access your gifting, though, is to clear out the things that don't serve you anymore. There's often so much jammed up in there, we can't expose anything new of our capacity because the bandwidth is being sucked into all these other places. So when you get quiet, when you slow down, when you start to attune to your body, even just ask your body a question. What do you need from me right now? Where do we have blocked energy or stuck energy? Or maybe there's like an achy spot. A lot of people notice it physically. Maybe you got a bit of a stiff neck or headache or something. This is where getting curious is a superpower. Because if you're going slow, and then I tell people, if you think you're going slow down even more, take another deep breath, maybe a 2 or 3 deep breaths, and slow down the breath even more to help you really expand time. It's like a zip file. You can take this information and start to expand it and open up that time portal to tap into deeper information in your body. So let's say you have a sore shoulder, your attention's going there, your focus is going there. Maybe just put your hand on your shoulder and ask yourself and ask your body, what do you need from me right now? Or what is it that's created this blockage? What is it that's created so much stuck energy? Because in Chinese medicine, Things that get stuck, that's where the issues come from. If it's not stuck and everything's moving, that's beautiful, harmony. But if you have physical pain, there's definitely something stuck there. And one might say, well, it's an injury I had. And it's like, yeah, that could be true. Why did you have the injury though? There's always another level. There's always another set of stairs to go down there. So if you slow down and you start asking those questions, and then the greatest job you have in that moment is to be curious and open and just listen. And you might be surprised when you start listening to your body, what it has to tell you. You might find, oh gosh, I'm holding on to something. I don't know what. What is it? And just slow down more and get curious and allow your body to start communicating with you. So much of the time, we're not listening though. We're not listening to our bodies, and especially because we're going so fast. You cannot get the full depth of listening when you're going 100 miles an hour. So some people, I can probably feel in the audience, they're like, I don't have time to slow down. And if you're not going to give your body time, nobody else is going to do that either. So
Yeah.
this is a choice that you can take, and then you can start working with the clearing.
Man, I love it. I think that there's a saying that if you don't have time to meditate for 5 minutes, then you probably need at least an hour, like type of mentality, which I think is so true for the people that can't slow down. Talk about an example. I know you gave one about somebody that you've worked with where you've cleared chords. It was a chord, I think is the way you described in the, but what, like, talk about like how it can physically remove pain. You alluded to it right now, but give a specific example just so the audience kind of knows a little bit even more directly on how it can change your life.
Mm-hmm. Let me see what comes up. There's hundreds and hundreds. The example that's surfacing right now is a young woman, early 30s. It's a few years ago now. And she was in really rough shape when she came in. She couldn't really walk very well, had a hard time sitting down, standing up, couldn't bend over to pick up her kids or anything like that. And nobody really knew what was going on with her. She had seen a ton of doctors, tests, all kinds of things. I do tend to see a lot of mystery syndromes and like undiagnosed conditions, where there's things happening that haven't been understood yet. And so we brought her into the office space there and sat down, and she had tears coming down just because she's in so much pain all the time. And I started asking her some questions, just starting to again listen and slowing down. And we went back in time a little bit to something I often look for in a question I have, or when somebody says this, and you can do this for yourself. I haven't felt the same since, is a line that really, really stands out to me as a practitioner. Somebody went somewhere, they traveled somewhere, whatever it was, they had surgery, they had an experience, or they got an infection. It could be anything, or even a conversation with somebody, and I haven't felt the same since. And that's what I'm looking for. And so as we, wound things back a little bit, we came back in her history to a surgery that she had a few years prior. And I might have asked her, she might have said, I can't remember, like, have you felt the same since then? And she said, no. And so I knew something happened in that moment. Was it the surgery? Was it the anesthetic? Was it the energetics of something? Was it medication afterwards? What was it and what led to that? And so we unpacked a little bit more, but then that's where I start to feel the guidance. It's like hunting, you're stalking something in the forest and you can feel it, you can sense it, you're getting close. You may have not seen it visually yet, but you can tell it's there. And so I was tracking it down through those questions and through slowing down. And one of the things that she said really stood out to me. And that was when she was getting wheeled into the operating room, she was still conscious and they were talking to her. And as soon as she went through those operating doors, she felt an immense amount of panic and huge anxiety, and she got super scared. And she didn't know why. Obviously, she was going in for surgery, but she said it wasn't even that. I knew what they were going to do. I wasn't super scared about that. This was something different. And for me, I'm like, oh, there's something right here. What is that? And I'm not sure. It was probably just intuition, or maybe because I've seen thousands of people, you get to learn a thing or two. The sense that I had is like, oh, there was something within that space that really kind of stuck to your system. Maybe the person in there before had a really harsh experience. or somebody might have passed away in there previous to her surgery. Like, we don't know what happens in the places before we get there. And it's something to be mindful of. I know for some people they might be like, oh, he's going off the rails, but just hang with me for a second. What it looked like is she picked up something that was still stuck to her system in that place. And she could feel it intuitively when she went in through those doors. It didn't feel right to her. And when she left those doors, she wasn't the same. There was something additional with her. And so once we got onto that, I thought, well, let's just work with that. And so we did some cord clearing around, not even really knowing what that was, but just that she had picked up something, and she couldn't track it down for herself. So I helped her just get quiet, did some breathing. I try and amplify whatever's happening for somebody in the most supportive way so that they can kind of get underneath it. And then we pulled it clear. And after that, she cried a ton. Her body felt different. And I'm not making this up, but about 20 minutes later, we were finished the visit. She went to stand up and she started crying immediately. And I thought, oh, what's wrong? What's happened? And she just looks at me with a bit of disbelief and confusion and a little bit of shock. And she goes, I haven't been able to stand up straight like this in years. Like, what happened? And I'm looking at her, she's looking at me, and then she starts laughing because she doesn't have pain anymore. And she starts crying because of the relief of it. And it's like confusion. Like, could this be real? Like, what the heck is going on, Kevin? And I'm looking at her. I'm surprised too, because it was so dramatic. And then more laughing, more tears, more crying. And I'm like, just walk around the room. And she did. And she's like, oh, I feel completely different. And again, like the eyes of somebody almost bewildered or not understanding what just happened. And some people might think, oh, Kev's some kind of miracle worker. I don't think that. I think that between her and I, we slowed down enough to listen enough to identify a place where there's a significant blockage. It wasn't her energy, it was other. And then we went through a series of steps to clear that. And it sounds really simple, but it was so powerful. And so by the time she went out to the waiting room, everybody that she came with, because she got assisted to come in because she couldn't come in under her own power, they started looking with shock and confusion of, we saw you go into that room and we saw you come out, and like something crazy happened in there. And when they left, like I had to sit down and take that in for a little while of like how something could change so drastically just from identifying like other connected, entangled energy that wasn't part of her natural system and that had been pulling on her for that amount of time since that day. And then since the day in my office has been gone, and she is a completely different person now, living a completely different life. And yeah, I'm still blown away, but these things happen.
Man, I love it. I have so many questions that I know we don't have a ton of time. Where do I want to go with this? Let me ask you this. Like, I think everybody's got a good flavor. Obviously, they probably want a ton more. So if you do, you can obviously go see him. Where's the best place to find you? Let's start. Like, I just don't want to end up forgetting about that.
So drkevinpreston.com or Dr. Kevin Preston on Instagram. You can kind of pay attention to all the things that we're doing. We've got events that we're doing, like big in-person events. And then I'm in the process of building courses to teach more of these elements. I do online group programs as well. So I got a few irons in the fire and more to come. I still am seeing people in person one-to-one, although I've recently shifted that quite a bit too. And I am speaking more and, doing more podcasts and things like this. There's a lot of creative force coming through. I want to have an impact on the planet. I want to reach a lot of people. And then I also work with kind of higher impact individuals in like 6-month or year-long containers. And those are, people that want to dive really, really deeply, that are ready to face, bigger challenges in their life, or they're ready to go to that next level of like sparking or optimizing that gift within their life and their relationships and their business. Maybe they're coaches or practitioners, or maybe they're CEOs or executives, because I've kind of worked with a swath of all of those types of people in the population. And I also love doing that one-to-one deep dive work, because when we impact one person in a powerful way, it changes their family dynamics. It changes their impact on their teams within their businesses, and especially as entrepreneurs, it can impact their reach and also their health and vitality in doing that in an aligned way where they're not killing themselves in the process, where they can actually make their lives better and they can get healthier and they can be successful and impactful. So yeah, a little bit of what I'm doing. So yeah, it's coming out.
Nice. Well, I've definitely got to fire some more questions at you. This
Sure.
is some of them I think everybody will kind of have, everybody will learn for them. But I think the first one I want to ask now that, the audience has gotten to know you a little bit. Have you ever felt pressure to conform in the medical world? And like, have you always gone your own way? You strike me as a guy that's like, I wouldn't say you're always becoming, you haven't figured it out necessarily. I know you don't think that way, but like one side of me is like, man, he's really far along compared to most people. And when it comes to medicine, but is there anything where you felt pressure to conform to the medical world?
The short answer is yes, for sure. I think I felt pressure most of my life to conform, and not just in medicine. And, we could talk about society and culture and programming and things like that that are, you know, acceptable or not acceptable or don't rock the boat. And, I'm a big fan of human design. For anybody that knows human design, it's sort of a paradigm of thought. I'm into gene keys and different things, but really what I'm always trying to do is just understand myself more and understand my gifting, understand my shadows, the places that I'm still in development. And it kind of makes me chuckle because my kids are in school, right? And they have different, grades or marks, or there's different words like, oh, this is emerging, or this is still in development, or you're proficient. And there's lots of parts of me that I would say are still in development. And then there's lots that I've cultivated that are quite proficient. And so I would say overall, there has been a big shift over the years where I care less about what people think. I know I'm here to make an impact. I know not everybody's going to agree or like it, and that's okay. And I think that was one of the biggest pieces is I needed to let go of people's approval. And I'm still human. Like if somebody is at me for something I've said or done or whatever, I still feel that. I just don't maybe feel it as much, or I can get curious is where's this coming from for them? Maybe we have different views, different beliefs, and I'm okay with that. I think that's the beautiful diversity of life. Like thank God we're all different. Thank goodness we're not all the same with every idea and opinion and thoughts and all these things that are available. But I have learned to ask questions. And I would say maybe that's one of the biggest keys that I don't know if that was just in me, but the more questions I ask, the more I realize that a lot of people don't know what the hell is going on, you know, me either. And then as soon as you get, because the first level question, you might get a response. But then if I ask a deeper question, and then the third level questions I find are where the juicy stuff is, where I start to find in a lot of cases in the past, they hadn't actually asked those deeper questions and they might be an authority in a particular, factor of life or industry or whatever it is. And I found like, oh, that's interesting. Not everybody wants to go as deep as what I want to go. And the deeper I would go, the more curtains I would kind of pull back, the more truth I would see within myself and then about life and society. And so that actually continued to give me the fuel to keep asking questions, that things aren't always what they seem, and especially in medicine. Because at the end of the day, the thing that keeps my path clear is my North Star, and that is I want to be of service and I want to help people get better in every capacity. And what are the best and healthiest and most clear and beautiful ways to help people do that? Those are the things that I seek. Those are the things I get more training and understanding in. It's a pretty broad topic, but I love being able to be very specific and very laser guided because I want to get results. So I'm here to help people. And what I've learned is there's a lot of things that are not helpful, and a lot of the things that have shown to not be helpful in a lot of cases are the common accepted practices. And one of the things that has taught me this is the patients that I get that have already done all of that stuff and they may not be well. In fact, they may be more unwell for doing some of them. And then that just has me go back to the drawing board of like, wow, here's all the things they did. They just told me everything they've been through. They're not better. They didn't get results. So we're obviously going to have to go at this differently, and I'm going to have to think about it differently. What's being missed here? What is it that has gotten overlooked or the person hasn't ever been listened to? Why don't we do something novel and listen? And why don't we think about it in a completely different way, that this is a full-hearted human being that's in front of me that's struggling, let's find the places in their life that are constricting or pressuring them to go in a certain direction that's not serving them, and to just keep asking questions. And the more questions I ask, the more I realize there's so much available to us that has been less understood. And so I do kind of follow the beat of my own drum these days, and it's not always easy. I have doubts and fears and insecurities just like everybody else, but they don't stop me so much now compared to in the past.
Man, I love it. Are you cool if I ask questions for about 15 more minutes? I just want to
Yeah,
be mindful of your time.
yeah, happy to keep rolling with you, Max.
All right. Now let's do it. Well, I'm going to jump in. So, one thing that in the session that I was in, I started asking questions about various things. And, in my mind, me and my wife and a lot of people like my age, I just turned 50. I will invest time to basically what I've started to understand. I'm just investing so I physically and mentally feel better for longer. I have a 6-year-old. I'm 50 years old. And she always asks me, she's like, "How old will you be when I'm, 30?" And I'm like doing the math. I'm like, "Holy shit, I'm gonna be, be pretty dang old." So anyway, that's like one of my driving, reasons. And I've been pretty good in my life about staying physically fit, and everything for me starts there. But there are some things that I do, and a lot of people like me do when they get to a point in life where they're investing in it. I want to run a couple things by you and see you. Just like I said, you kind of you go to your own kind of drum beat. I just want to hear you hit me exactly how you think about some of these things, because you started in that session and then I kind of pulled out because thought it would be a little selfish for me to continue down this road. But now that I've got you, I'm going to ask you. So, some of the things that I've kind of got started to get into, and a lot of people, you start talking about red light therapy or stem cells or NK cells, or like all these things that, if you want to invest money, you can definitely optimize with them. What are your feelings? And we'll just start like maybe a little bit more entry level with like sauna and red light and, any of those types of therapies. And then advance, we'll start getting into selfishly. I kind of want to hear your opinion on stem cells and all that. And yeah, what is your take on these types of optimizations that a lot of people, are talking about or participating in?
Maybe one of the things that I've noticed is, we'll take it back to Chinese medicine philosophy, perhaps, and maybe it's just what I've cultivated in terms of my thought process around this, is that I'm pretty patient, and I'm not usually one to jump onto new trends very quickly, because I want to see data, I want to see research, and I want to see the bigger picture. So I'm always playing the long game. And just like you mentioned, you're playing the long game too. And there's a lot of ways to go about that, especially right now because of new technology, a lot of research, a lot of biohacking information. I still don't really think that we can do it better than nature does it. And so most of the things that I do for myself, whether I would put it in the biohacking category or not, I don't know, but I'll go to the forest and try and find the biggest tree in that forest, and that wisdom and energy of that tree can physically change the ion exchange of your body and the electron chains of your system to remap and recalibrate, what's the word here? Recalibrate or restore the energy flow of your system. If you think of the tree roots that go deep down into the ground, and we talk about grounding, that is one of the best ways that I found to do it. So I'll take my shoes and socks off, bare feet on the ground, and I'll sit at the base of the tree, put my back up against it, and I'll just sit staring at the forest, looking at the sun, listening to the birds. And the way that I feel after that is always better. There's never a time I've done that where it hasn't helped me feel better, more light, less stressed, breathing more deeply, more energized, or yeah, more relaxed, like more grounded, more calibrated, where maybe I was feeling stressed, heart rate was up a little bit, maybe I was going through something. And then I start to feel very harmonized and regulated. And there's never been a time I've done it where it hasn't worked. So I say it's got 100% success rate in my experience. And so would I take like a grounding mat over top of that? No, I wouldn't. But if you're somebody who's inside a lot all day and you're not connecting to the earth, you're not getting a chance to ground in nature barefoot, then this is where I think some of the technology can be really helpful. Yeah, get a grounding mat. I feel like that'll be better than not doing any of those things. Or if you're not getting the morning sunlight and you're stuck inside in a dark office with no windows, Red light therapy is probably going to be very helpful. So I am a fan of some of these things. And personally, I tend to default to nature where I can. And if I'm not getting enough of that, that's where I start to implement technology to help me out. So, there's a local sauna place here in Vernon that I go to. I'm grateful for them. They have red light therapy in the sauna, and I love it, and it feels great. And I would say sauna is something that has stood the test of time. It has some of the most long-term data and research available. It's talked about in Chinese medicine. It's talked about in lots of lineages of medicine that have been around for ages and ages and ages, longer than, us as individuals. And it has shown to decrease all-cause mortality. And so I grew up doing a sauna. Luckily enough, my dad built one when I was 5 years old, and we'd be out there in the snowbank and, running around, and then sauna, hot and cold. And maybe that's part of the reason I'm as healthy as I am now, because I've continued to do that. But I also know that there's a long-term research data pool supporting that. So some of the newer things I'm a little bit hesitant to recommend because I haven't seen the longer term data. And there's this thing that's happening in science now, or trends, that things will come and go. And anybody that's listening that has anything to do with medicine at all, you'll know what I'm talking about. Something will come up, it gets really popular for a while, and then maybe it starts to fall off after a couple of years, and then you don't really hear about it that much. And then something else comes up, and everybody's talking about that for a year or two, and then it kind of falls off a little bit. So now that I've seen that trend a lot over the last, 20 years or so, I'm a little bit more cautious to jump on the bandwagon because I want to see the big picture. And I know how to read research. I know how to read data really well. And some of the data that I see is not always done really well. And then you got to look at who did the research. Do they have an agenda? Does this benefit them in some way? And not overlook those things. And I'm not saying there's not beautiful products out there to be super helpful, but my default, the longer I practice, is actually more nature. So for vitamins, supplements, all those different things, I like finding the cleanest products I can that are the least processed possible, that are the closest to their natural form in nature, because nature already did millions of years of research. you know, it's already been cultivated. I'm a big fan of medicinal mushrooms, reishi, shiitake, cordyceps, shaga mushroom grows here in BC readily on birch trees. That stuff is medicine. And guess what? Modern research says, hey, this is anti-cancer. This is amazing for the immune system. This is great for energy. It's great for mitochondrial support. And it's directly built from nature. And you don't have to adulterate it very much or process it very much to take it in. So wherever possible, to me, minimum is better. Like, living that clean life is going to be better than maybe adding on tons of electronics and things. And again, I'm not saying it's not helpful, but that's my question. That's my curiosity is, what about 5 years from now? What about 10 years from now or 20? Some of the things I think that are being recommended heavy right now may not actually stand the test of time. And we don't know because they haven't been used. So I don't even have the answers on that. But the other thing is nobody else does either. So when other people are like, this is the best thing for longevity, but it's only come out, after a year or two, then I'm like, you can't really say that with any kind of weighting. And then I default back to Chinese medicine that has thousands of years of those principles being true. I'm still going to go back and follow that. But, I'm also somebody who loves learning. I'm super curious. So I read a lot of the stuff that comes out. So hopefully that gives a bit of a snapshot of what you're curious about.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful. I know in my epigenetics profile, one thing that it clearly stated was like, I just need to get out in nature. Like that was one of the things. And I'm sure that's true for almost everybody, but it was particularly for my type. And when I do, I am so much clearer headed. Like when I get out, it must be, from the grounding and just being out. So that's one thing. And I live in two extreme different places. One, I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona now during the winter, and it's, basically in a concrete neighborhood. And then in the summer, I'm in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and I'm like kind of more in the forest. And I can't tell you mentally how much better I feel as soon as I get to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho in nature. It's like, I mean, it's crazy, but I've started the awareness is started to help me. And I lay out a PMF mat and then I'll red light. And then lately I've been, riding a bike for 12 minutes, just sucking oxygen down, like doing that combo. And I feel amazing. What about anything like what are the I've tried to, I love your messaging here. And so I'm doing anything to try to get to some different pockets of stuff. But what would you say one of the most non-traditional treatments per se, or like things you do on a regular basis that are like more on the outskirts of like what people would think? Is there like what's the thing that you do or think or believe in that would people would be surprised like, "Oh, that's crazy that that would help optimize you?"
Acupuncture, although it's very common now, I acupuncture myself all the time. And here's a good example of the combo. Like I've got my aura ring right here, and I don't wear it through the day that much because I'm, just with some of the stuff I'm doing, I don't really like wearing rings, but I wear it at night and I shut off the Bluetooth because I like to diminish the amount of signal as much as possible. I shut my Wi-Fi off at night. It's right over there. I go and unplug it. Is it a pain in the butt some of the time? I'll be laying in bed going to sleep. I'm like, forgot to unplug it. But it does impact my environment. And I want like a quiet, clear environment from an electromagnetic point of view and all the other sources. But I still like tracking my sleep and I like tracking my HRV and readiness scores with the Oura Ring. I think it's a good product. One of the reasons I chose it is because I can shut off the Bluetooth. Because I can shut it off and then put it on the charger, I can still get my data, but it doesn't hold the same signal. And what I've noticed is every time I acupuncture myself in the evening, my readiness score is always better and my sleep score is always better. And I feel better. Like I can tell I'm more relaxed. My sleep is a little bit deeper, but to have the data on the science side, because I love data too, is really, really cool to see it directly impact every time. And there's never been a time it doesn't do that for me. So that's one thing that is a regular part of my life that, again, it's maybe not, super out there, super edgy. But I'm just trying to think of like, what are some of the things that I do that I would love to share? Hmm.
No, as you think about it, no, these are the types of things that this is exactly what I was going for because it kind of goes to your core of like, hey, it's everything's within you, so it's helping kind of like keep everything out. So these are the exact types of things. What about even along the lines of, and again, this is a little selfish for me, but hopefully people are in the same boat. Is uh, I've I haven't let's talk about alcohol for a minute. Like I got stem cells, so I don't drink alcohol because I don't wanna, like, waste money on stem cells and just fight the alcohol. I feel so good right now after not drinking for and I didn't even drink that much before because 'cause I've been through this cycle and I have this totally different relationship with alcohol. In fact, the thing that I go back to that came up for me when I didn't drink for, whatever it was, 60 days, was, like, the first thing I thought about was, like, I just looked at it different. I just could now because when I do consume alcohol, which I will, I like to socialize and drink alcohol. But the one thing that came up for me was I can't believe I used to drink alone at some point in my life. Like I feel like now when I look back, it's like, why would I do that? Because I would drink alone and then destroy my sleep, and then the next day, it's like I just don't even understand like how I didn't know back then and how I didn't have the awareness of drinking alcohol by myself, like how weird that was. So there's certain things like that. But what is your take on alcohol and just in general with like patients? I mean, you have to give your personal opinion. I mean, obviously it's pretty much poisoning your body to a certain extent. But what is your personal opinion on it?
Yeah, I would say sugar and alcohol is sugar essentially is highly inflammatory for the body. Doesn't mean I don't consume any sugar ever. No, I feel like diet wise for me, I'm like 90%, 10% maybe not so good, 90% good. And one of the doctors I trained with years ago, this is kind of his philosophy, although my own take is that it's changed a little bit. He said 70-30 was good. That if you're feeling strong and healthy, you have no illnesses, there's no chronic inflammation, like, you're good, then 70-30 on the diet's fine. Like, gotta live a little bit, moderation, it's okay. But if you have an issue come up or an illness come up or there's something happening, go to 100%. Clean up the diet. Do the best you can. Get really, really clear on that until you're better and until you're feeling really good again. And then you can back off. And I would say the difference of what I see now versus like 15 years ago through that training was there's so many toxins available now that we can't mess around as much. And it's not to get all serious or harsh or you got to be overly disciplined, but I also don't want to sugarcoat it. There are way more toxins now than there were 15, 20 years ago, and 50 years ago, and 100 years ago. Way more, exponentially more. So when you put toxins like alcohol in the body regularly at any kind of volume, you are poisoning the body. And if you're also accepting sources of other toxins through food, air, clothing, whatever, laundry soap, that you're not paying attention to, you're asking your body to have to work really hard just to have a regular day. So what I look at in terms of what the input is in the system, less is more. And I don't really have anything against alcohol per se, other than for me, I don't really drink at all. And it's been that way for years. I might have a glass of something once in a while, but there has been circumstances I've been out at a restaurant, I got made fun of for sure. Although less now, there's a huge trend of people not drinking, which is pretty cool. I'm sitting there, I get a prime rib, big juicy steak. Everybody's ordering glasses of wine, and I ordered 1 ounce of wine. I asked the server, "Can I get 1 ounce of wine?" And she looked at me, 1 ounce? And I said, "Yeah, I just want 1 ounce only. Is that possible?" She said, "Okay." And so she brought over a glass, poured 1 ounce in it, and it barely was enough to cover the bottom of the glass. Like it looked pretty funny. And everybody at the tables got the big glasses making fun of me. And I wasn't trying to make a statement. But again, if I'm listening to my own guidance and following the beat of my own drum, I wanted the taste of the red wine with my prime rib, but I did like micro sips through the eating of the steak and just like savoring the flavor where less is more. It almost made me appreciate it more. And it was so good. And I enjoyed it so much. But it was 1 ounce. And I would say maybe I got more enjoyment from that 1 ounce than 8 ounces or something. And so, yeah, it's not something I have in my life really at all. And I just feel so much better. And I think I've become addicted to feeling really healthy and clear headed every day. And I'm not willing to trade that for anything because I'm clear headed with my kids. I'm clear headed with my mission, my vision, what I'm here to do. If I get up and want to work out or meditate or whatever, and there's any kind of cobwebs from having a few drinks the night before, it's not worth it to me. And if I'm giving myself permission to just be me, I have as much or more fun compared to when I did drink in the past to where I'm at now because it's authentically me. It's not the alcohol speaking, it's Kevin speaking.
Yeah, I mean, once I become a little bit more aware, and again, for full transparency, I still plan on drinking. I'm going to the Kentucky Derby May 1st. I plan on drinking there.
80-20 max, right?
Yeah, 80-20. But the thing on alcohol is just so fascinating. And the thing about addiction, I think the most addicting things on the planet is exactly what you're talking about. This is just a layman's. I'm not a doctor. He is. But sugar and screens, like for kids, like we're giving them the most addicting thing on the planet, a phone, and then we're like, get off your phone. I mean, you gave it to them, and what do you expect them to do? And then sugar, hopefully we're starting to clean that up a little bit in our food. But when it comes to alcohol, the one thing that fascinates me is like, I don't know the exact percentages, but I'll get it close. It's like 10% of the people that consume like over half the alcohol or more. It's something crazy like that. And I think like just if you think about that, like it's terrible. I mean, it's like it's people, and they glorify it a little bit. They have the tagline, and this is Joe Polish and Genius Network who's always bring this up, but it's so true. He's kind of got me thinking about it. The tagline for drinking is drink responsibly. And like clearly 10% of the people drinking 50% of the alcohol, that they're not drinking responsibly. And it's even more in your face because they're using that as a tagline to get you to drink more. And to me, it's just like crazy. Or what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Yeah, except for all the venereal diseases and people going broke and the drug addictions and like the alcohol addictions. Like, yeah, all that doesn't stay in Vegas. But what a great tagline to get people there. Anyway, I digress a little bit. What about so some of the other things, diet. So you're talking about diet. Recently, it's just more on intuition. I got stem cells and I've been buckling down. I'm probably close to, I've been working at it for over 20 years, but pretty close to like one of the top shapes that I've been in my life in my later years for sure. And I started eating almost as much as I could clean food, but I started eating a lot of red meat again, like almost carnivore style. Like I try to eat steak and eggs every morning. I didn't this morning just because I didn't have time, but I've been just like going for it. And honestly, I've never felt so good in my life. And for a while, I went away from dairy because I was like, I think it was more trendy. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, maybe I'm allergic to it. Well, it turns out I've just been introducing it back and I feel great. And I'm just, consuming a lot of it. And for me, I've been working out so much that I feel like I have to eat as much good food as possible to stay up. But when you think about diet, you're talking about prime rib. And on top of this, my wife doesn't eat red meat. So she kind of gives me this like weird look every once in a while when I'm just like consuming tons of red meat. She doesn't care. But what are your thoughts on diet? Like, is there anything and what I picked up on, you talked about seasons, and if you think about, seasons, different eating, like, if you look at our ancestors, like they all ate different depending on the season. And so what are your thoughts on diet and how does that play into the picture on what we can learn from it and really go about our lives?
There's a beautiful element here of adaptation to different types of diets, and a lot of things have been talked about, like eating right for your blood type, and looking at your ancestry, looking at your genetics and things like that as a factor. And I do think those things hold weight. The thing I've thought about with diet, because again, I've been in healthcare for a long time now, and again, different trends will kind of come and go, and I like to look at the big picture of which ones have some staying power, which ones may stand the test of time. And the thing that I keep coming back to is that the type of diet, and I don't know for sure. So one of the things I want to say from a medicine point of view, I believe most doctors, me included, should say, this is my current understanding, because I may learn more, I may get more data, more science, more research, whatever, that might alter and change my opinion. So none of this is ever written in stone. It always changes. But my current understanding is that even more so than the type of diet is where you get your food from and how clean is it. So if somebody is going full carnivore, but they're getting mass feedlot, steroidal, antibiotics, chemicals, synthetics, all those different things in that meat, is that going to be supportive for their body, or is their body actually going to have to detox tons and tons of that, toxic soup out of the system? Yes. Could they get quite inflamed from it and then say, I tried the carnivore diet, I got super unhealthy and inflamed? It's like, where did you get your product from? Where'd you get your meat from? How did you prepare it? Like, all of those things I think matter. And if somebody's more vegan or more on the plant side of things, vegetarian, where are you getting your plants from? Same thing. Has it been sprayed so much with, chemicals and fertilizers and all these inorganic compounds? What happens to your body when you take that in? So this is what I've come down to more so is, pay attention to when your body feels good and when it doesn't. But I really do put a lot of time and energy into sourcing my food from the cleanest places I can, where either I know the farmers directly or farmers markets and they're organic, or they're not using sprays. Or for those of you that are like, I can't afford organic, choose non-GMO, choose the things that are most unadulterated from nature, and your body generally is going to be happier. So at this phase, I'm kind of open to the various diets there that I experiment with myself. I listen to my body. I've become more and more attuned to my body. I still eat meat. I have no plans to discontinue. My body does well with it. I eat lots of, lighter like veggies and things like that and salads and that kind of stuff through the summertime. But I track my system and how I feel. And in wintertime, more root vegetables, things like, yams and beets and things that grow under the ground that have a little bit deeper energy source. And it's like the trees in the wintertime, all the sap goes into the ground. And in the summertime, all the leaves and the buds and everything come out. So if you think of your body energy, it is like that too. Our energy does go deeper in the winter, especially for us Canadians up here. Maybe not true in Scottsdale as much, but there is an energy dynamic shift depending on the lights in, especially in the northern hemisphere. So follow that trend, follow those foods. And there is something to be said about getting local. I have local honey that's made from like wildflowers in the Okanagan here, because it helps give me data from my external environment to attune my body to where I live. And the more attuned to where I live, the better I'm going to feel, because then I'm living in harmony with nature here. So for people that travel a lot, it can get a bit difficult. If you're a fan of honey, I do recommend this little hack that wherever you go, especially if it's a big climate shift, to get a little sample or get a little bit of, if you can, like raw, unpasteurized, like wild honey from that region, because that'll immediately give you a whole bunch of biological inputs about that region that your body can then attune to and start to come into harmony. So like take in the data from that place, or walk in the forest, same thing, like breathing in the flora that's in there, the mosses, the trees, the leaves, the pollens. Breathe it in so your body can actually start to get its information connected, and then it'll adapt. Our bodies are highly adaptable.
Man, so much good stuff there. I'm gonna go on for 8 more minutes, and I feel like bad that I've taken you this long, but there's so much that I want to continue to ask you if you're okay with it.
100%.
Um, so I love the hunting thing. So I'm about to travel to this summer. About June, I go to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. What's very different is typically I don't really sleep as good because the sun stays up till like 10 p.m. And then, that's when I kind of maybe drink a little bit. And like, so I have all these things, new things going on, new environment. What advice do you have for me and anybody else that's getting in this position where you're now going to go to a location where the sun is staying up a lot longer, and now you're trying to fight basically nature of like I'm on the clock here in Arizona, and then you go all the way up to the northern Idaho. What is your advice to help, I guess, lessen those effects of fighting a way longer sun being up?
I suppose maybe the first thing is to not fight it so much. And obviously, you got to kind of map like how you feel, your vitality, how much sleep you want. But and here's the thing about the Aura Ring too, is like, I don't want to get too overly identified with the data from the ring over and above like how I naturally feel with my body. And so in Chinese medicine, they do say like sleep less in the summer, essentially, is the way that the translation is. And they say sleep more in the winter. And so one of these elements that we often have quite controlled environments, and it's spoken about more and more. We have air conditioning, we got power and lighting, and I'm grateful for that. But if we threw away our watches, threw away our phones, no screens, none of those things, and we're just kind of living in the wild, you would be naturally adapting to your surroundings fairly quickly. And you would generally also feel really, really good. I also live in the modern world where, we have appointments and things, and we are looking at the clock a little bit. So sometimes you got to kind of split the medium a little bit of, you could put a sleep mask on if you want to protect your eyes from the light a little bit more. But actually this time of year, and I've been doing it for a while, I don't close my blinds because I want the light to wake me up naturally, and I want to give my body time to adapt to the difference in the daylight. And for me, I don't know if this is true for you, but I don't sleep as much in the summer, and I don't feel like I need as much. And sometimes I just feel like, oh, time to get a good sleep. I'll throw a sleep mask on, shut the blinds. That's okay. But generally, I don't want to override like the natural impulse of the sun in terms of regulating my body, because I want to be outside. I want to be flowing with that sun. And in the winter, I do try and go to bed earlier. And not that I sleep in the winter, so it's a bit of a fight sometimes. But the most that I can, I do want the outer environment to kind of help my body shift through the seasons. And especially because we have 4 distinct seasons here, it does change quite a bit. Whereas if you're around the equator, doesn't change much at all. So I'm not sure if that was, super helpful or not, but
No, that's helpful. One of the things I try to do when I'm there is just on a regular basis, try as soon as the sun goes down, go to sleep. Like that's my signal from the universe. It's time to go to bed. And if I could do that, then sun comes up pretty early. So that that kind of helps me out. I've got one last question, and then like this has been absolutely amazing, man. I can't tell you, selfishly, I'm enjoying this hopefully as much as everybody else. But I got one last question. I'm always trying to push you in this area because I have so much respect for you. But is there anything you believe or practice that you hesitate to share publicly because you worry people think it'll be too far out there?
oh yeah. I probably think about that every day. I think about it with my kids of like, am I getting too weird? If is this too weird? I got a giant tuning fork over there, and I've got stage, and I've got all these things, and I also have to live with like some lightheartedness that if you can't laugh at yourself, like, what are you doing? So every once in a while, the former versions of me definitely would have been confused or made fun of, Kev standing here with an eagle feather and some sage, clearing my home, clearing the energy. But I do those things. And I also love to just, look at what are my thoughts through the day. And at the end of the day, before I go to bed, I look at, the big picture again. where's the gaps in my life right now? Because there is this saying, I think it's actually from like Kabbalah and some of the more spiritual teachings. And the idea is that when you get to the end of your life, this physical vessel, you will be shown where your potential was and where you're expressive of that potential or not. And the size of that gap could possibly be equal to a huge amount of pain because you'll see what you didn't do. And I'm not necessarily talking about making all the money and success and everything else. It's more about your relationships, your behavior, your fulfillment of the soul blueprint that you were given. And did you step into that fully? Like, did you kind of fulfill your own individual soul mission? And so if you wait until the end of your life to look at that, there could be a big gap. So for some, it might sound like a little bit morbid, but I think about that as like, whenever it is my time, I do want to be as satisfied as possible that I did my best to close that gap as much as I possibly could, that I did fulfill my soul's mission. And so those are things that I think about on a regular basis that I don't always talk about very often. And it helps kind of keep my North Star. Like, am I making the impact even in my close relationships or with myself or with my kids, let alone, maybe the millions of people that I'll reach one day. But it starts with me, and there's that saying, put your own home in order first. And so those are things that I come back to. And admittedly, I can be pretty hard on myself at times, and my self-talk is not always tremendous and kind, and people think I got it all together all the time. Like, I definitely don't. And so these are the places that I'll go into is, okay, let's center, recalibrate. And, I've got, here's a good one. I've got some rose spritzer spray on my desk that I'll use. And I love the smell of roses. And yes, I'm a masculine dude as well, that you can live with both. And it just makes me smile. I don't know. It changes my mood somehow. So there's like a little glimpse into some of those things.
Oh, man. Well, thanks for sharing. You've been so generous with your time. You've been listening to the Built on Purpose podcast, brought to you by Y Scouts. You can listen to all of our past and future podcasts at yscouts.com. Dr. Kevin, thank you so much, man. This was absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much, Max. That was a lot of fun. Keep following your passion, everybody.